So today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different video than I typically do. Usually I just post gameplay that I have, but today I'm going to be trying to have a more research video, quote unquote research, more just my general game knowledge of trying to give a new player advice. Now this is not going to be a who you should summon for video. That is a whole different topic. This is solely going to be showing you guys and teaching people where the current characters that we have in the game land as useful or not useful, good, bad, when you're just starting the game and have done zero content. This is going to be aimed specifically at people who have not done any content. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to have all these characters. It doesn't mean you're going to have access to them. And I'm not telling you to summon for the units in Godly, because this game is in a little bit of a weird state where they are putting out really good standard units that are going to be in the standard pool. But it doesn't necessarily mean you should summon on them. They're raising the bar, and I think that's a 2.5 anti units are probably going to be pretty broken. Curious at what they're going to do, because it seems like they just keep ramping up how good these units are. And it's really tempting to summon on them. But if you're someone who's not going to spend $1 bajillion on this game like I do, then you can't just summon for every standard unit that comes out, even if they're really good. Because you only have so many cubes, this game is only so generous, and while it's heading in a better direction, it is very important to manage your cubes properly if you're not going to buy cubes. So, again, this is not a summon guide. I'm not telling you to summon for these limited DPSs that are going to be in Godly. But I'm simply showing you, if you're starting out the game and you have access to these characters, what they're going to do for you in the different game modes. And I'm going to go over every unit's placement, why they're there, and their general performance. So, starting off, we got Red Maki. Red Maki has been known as, for a long time, one of the worst units in the game. Her kit generally sucks, but she did get an SP buff. And another aspect of this list is that while SP buffs will be included, it does lower a unit's viability on this tier list if they have an SP buff, and they need it to be good. Because early game, you're not going to have access to it. It is very hard to beat sweep. Even the normal sweep. It is much easier now that people have figured out strats, and pretty much any unit in the game, to an extent, can do normal sweep. But it is still a challenge, especially if you don't have good units. It's very different from normal content because of the waves. The wave system gets rid of debuffs, so you can't rely on those, and it changes how you play. So because of that, and the RNG that you have to rely on to get bottles to get these SP buffs, it's gonna lower a unit's ranking, because I don't expect you to be able to get that very quickly, and it's not gonna help you until you get it. So anyways, Red Maki. Red Maki is gonna go in great. People have figured out how to clear hard sweep with her, the 200 million HP mode, and that's because of her SP buff. It's a pretty unique case, because rather than her SP buff making her damage better, which it does make her damage better, the main thing that people take advantage of in that clear is that her S1 gives her ult gauge charge 20% for 3 turns. So if you just spam this, you have 60% ult charging, you have 30% taijutsu, actually sorry, 60% because you're spamming it. So you have those stat buffs, and you are getting way quicker ults. I'm telling you, like, you're ulting every 3 turns, which matters a lot in sweep, because that's where most of her damage comes from to begin with, and the higher her HP is, which you're going to have high HP early on. If you have bad luck, maybe she gets lower HP, you're going to do less damage, but ideally you're going to be breaking the boss a lot because of her quick ult. It's pretty good. It's an interesting clear. It's very specific though. she is a decent taijutsu option after her SP buff, but overall she's not the greatest unit. Red Todo. This guy fucking sucks. He is by far, in my opinion, and some people will argue, Green Panda is the worst SSR in the game. But I just disagree. And I think the answer is Red Todo. His kit is so garbage. It is the worst thing I've ever read in my life. Because his S1 that costs 0 CE does more damage than his S3 that costs 30 CE. You're not going to be able to maintain this. And it's 100%. At level 10, it's 120%. His S1 is 150%. It's ridiculously low. The dev's intentions, from what I can see in this kit, is what they wanted you to do was use the S3 because of the black flash. It's going to do more damage when it black flashes because that's a 200% damage bonus. So you're doing 3 times the damage with black flash. Problem is, it's a 30% rate. A lot of bosses in this game, especially in Tower, have a general lower crit resistance, or sorry, general higher crit resistance. And if you don't know in this game, to black flash, you need to crit. It's like a second stage to crit. If you can't crit, you're not going to black flash. You can crit without black flashing, but you can't black flash without being able to crit. He increases his own crit damage, or his crit rate, but it's not enough. Black flashes are extremely inconsistent in this game, across the board essentially. There are some exceptions, like Green Todo, very, very consistent black flasher, but this guy is a very old unit who has some use. Now his one redeeming quality is the S2, which grants his ally behind him, which is different from the other Todos, to do it in front of him, but it gives him best friend status. And what it allows him to do is, as long as you have 10 CE available, he will counter any melee attacks that are done on the person behind him that have this status. Now, what you do is you grab him, and then you grab Red Miwa, who has a taunt. It gives it to her for 2 turns, and Todo will cover for 3 turns. So, as long as you have CE available, which is pretty easy to do, you can use you can use Yellow Kaito, R Kaito, to give them both infinite CE. She will continually taunt, and he will continually counter, but it only works on melee stages, not melee stages, just bosses that have melee attacks. And technically, he can do it more than once, but it requires that 10 CE. So if the boss does it too many times, it's not viable. If they have like 4 attacks, it's not viable, because you're just going to drain all your CE, and he's not going to be able to counter. So, with that garbage bag out of the way, we're going to move on to Hanami. I have to admit, I'm someone in this game who has dreaded any stalling. I have not done any stalling, not a single floor, not a single tower floor have I ever stalled, because I just do not like the gameplay. That's not beating the stage in my opinion, that is just waiting it out. And I completely understand if you want to do it, because it means you get to pass the content and move on. It's understandable in this game why you might want to do that. Personally, because I have access to every single unit in the game, I'm going to not do that. But Hanami is very good at stalling. She's good at stalling because she reduces the enemy's damage dealt with her S3. Now, it's 33% over 3 turns, so essentially 99% damage dealt. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be doing 0 damage, just to be clear, because enemies will buff themselves, and it's slightly different. It doesn't mean that they're going to be doing no damage. It's also in her ult, her domain expansion. Fun fact, domain expansion was specifically made for this game. It's pretty cool that they gave her that. But she's very good at that. Problem is, you're going to be doing that early game possibly, but she requires the domain investigation coins, which are going to take time to get. And you don't want to get her first. The person I'm going to recommend getting first is Mahito. And when we get to him, you'll know why, because he is incredible early game, even if you're not necessarily stalling. He's so good that early game you might not even necessarily be stalling. It's just clearing it quickly using his ult. But she's decent. You'll get some use out of her if you're going to stall stages. Later game though, you're not able to stall. They cut that out of tower, and stalling also does not help you in sweep. You only have 17 turns, so you just can't stall. Blue Gojo. This guy is like the GOAT of early game for a lot of people because he has a very good ult. You get it really quickly. He does leave after 7 turns, but he's a very simple unit to simply nuke the boss. If the boss isn't dead, you swap your next DPS in or sub DPS in, finish up. Very good. He has fallen off because nuking in general has fallen off, especially units that nuke and leave, because you only have so many turns to do so much damage, and there's limits. He's a very old unit. He is usable, especially early game, if you learn how to nuke. There's plenty of strategies on how to do that with him. But because of this, the grants urgent business status, he does leave after 7 turns. There's no way to prevent that. He does have attack immunity, which makes it very useful because you don't get hit. You'll get hit in late tower and in late sweep, but early game he's going to do incredible work. He's going to do a lot for you. And he is on that ticket banner that you first get access to, where you choose. Depending on what unit is currently out on the banner that you might want to summon on and reroll for, you might want to choose him, you might not want to choose him. You'll have to, I would recommend asking other players in the official Discord server. There are plenty of guides that people will put together. There are plenty of helpful people that will tell you if he's worth it at the time. Because like right now on Global, 0.2 Gojo is out. He's also blue, significantly better than this one. You wouldn't want to get this for your ticket. But he's a good option depending on the situation that you're entering in this game. He's going to be very useful for you. Blue Megumi. Blue Megumi is someone who had a small resurgence at some point between 60 and 80 for the tower floors. Actually, 81 as well, because he's not a bad DPS. He just doesn't really excel at anything. He's not bad. He's not good. You're going to have issues with him with the fact that he's not doing enough damage a lot of the time. He has an SP buff as well, which makes him much more usable. He's gotten, as you can see, 2 different adjustments to make him better because his initial kit was just that trash. But after SP buff, he's very usable, good damage. He gets his ult very quickly. He's going to be useful, but he's just not as good as other options that you have. I wouldn't recommend choosing this guy from your ticket at all. He's just nowhere near as good as the other options are, especially early game when you don't have access to his SP buff. He can do 81. I think he can do 81 without the SP buff, but hopefully by then you have different options. If you're just starting the game now, there's going to be newer units that do stuff better. He's decent. You might run into use cases for him, but I wouldn't recommend investing too heavily into him. Blue Jogo. Now, this guy also had a resurgence with his SP buff. It made him somewhat on par with an A1 Blue Sukuna at the time. People, I think, hyped him up a little bit too much. He's a good DPS. He has Dot, which is very helpful. Dot is very powerful early game. But, again, he's a metal unit. It costs a lot of metals to get him. And especially A0, a lot of units are not exactly the best. A1 is where you get to be very good because you get that initial 25% stat bonus to everything. Very important. A1 is great for any DPS. Supports can get away with that not having A1, although later in the game you will have higher tower floors in which you kind of do need that health. It is harder to stay alive, and so your supports might want to have that A1. But he's a metal unit, 1500 medals is a lot, especially when you're starting out. And again, Mahito, that we're going to get to later, is a much better option to have. He's incredible compared to them. So, Green Nanami. He is pretty bad. He's not the best DPS. He had an SP buff that made him more viable, but again, he doesn't excel at anything. Not particularly powerful. Doesn't do good damage. Doesn't support your team. He would do as a DPS early game if he's your only choice. He is mixed, so he works on taijutsu and jujutsu floors, which is nice, but it's just nothing impressive. He will work. Not recommended though. Green Yuji. This guy has reigned supreme for essentially 2 years as the best green taijutsu by a long shot. His S3 is incredible. He got an SP buff later on in 2020. I think it was late 2024. He got his SP buff, which made him even better. It was incredible, and he worked for a lot of people for a long time. Unfortunately, he was replaced as of recently. If you are able to log in and get the free calling game Yuji, he is better in every single way. Now, because calling game Yuji, he's free, you get one. This Green Yuji's DPS might be better, and probably will be better, especially if you can A5 him compared to an A0 calling game Yuji. But he's kind of fallen off in comparison. He also does somewhat rely on the SP buff later on. And again, in this tier list, if you have an SP buff, I don't expect new players to be able to get it necessarily. There's a lot of options as well who to invest into. He isn't the best option, especially if you're able to log in and get him the new calling game Yuji, because he's going to outshine this one, especially if they're both A0. Now, Green Panda, also one of the contenders for some of the worst SSRs in the game. The reason he is trash is because, as far as I'm aware, after you use your ult, you lose your ult. He gets to ult once. It's bad. He's unable to use ultimate skill. So he has crazy stat buffs, which is kind of the one redeeming fact of him. If you wait to ult, you could hypothetically use him in some stuff, because after the adjustment, where is it? He gets a ton of... Here, actually, I think I'm thinking of a different panda. I don't think this one has the good stat buffs. Yeah, I'm thinking of a different one. He has good multipliers, that's what I'm thinking of. His S1 has decent multipliers if he's in the gorilla mode, but to get into gorilla mode, you have to ult. So your damage is not good in this mode. Sorry, your damage is not good after this mode ends. You can't ult again, and then you're just essentially stuck with the S3, which costs 35 CE. It's unmanageable. It's actually worse in gorilla mode. It's an AoE, which is not bad, but it's worse damage wise to single target enemies, which is what you're probably gonna find once you get to mid tower. Early tower does have some just 4 random small enemies, which this might be decent for, but once you get a little further into the game, you got singular enemies. He's not very good. Seemingly gets worse after his ult, technically. That's why he's so bad. I still think Red Todo is worse, but they're both bad. Alright. And we have Yellow Inumaki. He is not bad because of one thing, and that is the fact that he can save your teammates from dying. He has a built-in mechanic where I believe it is 3 times in a run, he will stop the enemy from attacking if someone's about to die. So he can save someone from dying 3 times. Yeah, post adjustment. Nullifies the attack if an ally is about to receive a fatal one. 3 times. It's good. It does sacrifice some of his HP, but it makes a lot of runs. It nullifies any fatal attack an ally will receive 3 times. It does sacrifice some of his HP, but that's like pretty much everything Inumaki does in this game because of his cursed speech. It makes it a lot easier to clear things because you have essentially 3 chances to keep going, 3 turns to keep trying without you being killed. So he's great because of that. He has some debuffing capabilities, but doesn't excel at anything, pretty much used specifically for that gimmick to keep your team alive, but is worse than other options at doing that when you have other characters. So Yellow Nobara. She was great for a long time. She was the only other option instead of Tinjo. Technically you could count Yellow Nanami because he's mixed, but she was the only real Jujutsu option outside of Tinjo. And for a long time, Tinjo was not in standard. He was 0.5 Annie, and then you had to wait over a year for him to become standard. And even if you had him, he might have been a lower dupe than Nobara, since she might have been the real option for you. Her damage is pretty good. I think all the Nobaras have pretty decent damage, but they just tend to fall off. She has an SP buff that sort of made her better, but again, if you need an SP buff to be good, you're not going to be good early game. Junpei. This guy had a generational return. He is in Godly because he is incredible at keeping your team alive, while also now with an SP buff, even better at keeping your team alive while also giving your team buffs and debuffing the enemy. It is amazing what they did with this guy. He was initially, while good at keeping your team alive, I would say overall trash. Wasn't a very good unit. But now that he has had an adjustment and he's had an SP buff, he's very good because he decreases his own damage, but he also decreases all allies' damage received by 20% and increases their Jujutsu and Taijutsu stat by 15%. So you get a 45% stat buff and you get a 40% damage received reduction. He also grants a stun immunity to people behind him. It is really good for not just stalling, but overall just survivability, because he is buffing and also debuffing the enemy while keeping you alive. It's a very versatile kit. He doesn't do anything, he doesn't excel at anything specific, but all around when you look at his kit coming together, he is extremely good for tower. Not really used in sweep, because sweep you need a lot of damage really quickly, and he doesn't really help with that. Like I said, he doesn't excel at these things. He's an all-rounder to keep your team alive. Very good support. He does somewhat rely on that SP buff though. Before the SP buff, he still does 10%. Still helps. Or actually, sorry, it's 20% at max. It does go up based on level. So 20% per turn. And now it's only once. So if an enemy has multiple attacks per turn, technically they could take full damage the next attack, but it's all allies. And less likely to attack the same person over and over again. Very useful, even better after the SP buff, because it even costs less. They lowered the CE cost of it. Very good unit. Our first godly of this tier list. He is very good. Invest into him. Highly recommend. Now, Red Yuta. This guy, he was incredible for a very long time. He then became ass for a very long time. Probably the biggest fraud this game's seen. And then they SP buffed him, and again he is extremely viable. Still kind of a fraud, but much more viable than he used to be. The main reason that he lost a lot of his viability initially, and still technically now, is that he has a cooldown on his ult. And I mean, that doesn't sound like the biggest deal, but when we got tower floors that restricted the number of turns that you can have, which was 81 and above, it just straight up fails if you do not I mean, sorry, it straight up fails if you go past turn 30. After turn 30, your run loses. Now, even before that, turn 61 or floor 61 to 80, you would reach turn 30, and while technically you could stay alive with some cheese strats, which we'll get to later, the boss's damage increases by 3,000%. Essentially means that unless you have a cheese strat, all of your units instantly die. You're fucked. And because of that turn limit, he can't gain ult gauge for 4 turns after he uses his ult. And combined with the fact that he has a pretty high ult gauge to begin with, means that you're only ulting at most 3 times a run, usually 2 times, because he has a 1600 ult gauge, 1558. Now they somewhat fixed this because he used to have the 30 CE S3, which is a very, very powerful S3, one of the most powerful in the game, especially because it's not an ult, but it's incredible. Then they gave him the SP buff, which gave him a, let's see, it reduces the cost of this move down to 20, which made it much more viable because he gains more CE, and then you're saving up, you ult, and then you can basically spam this thing for 4 turns. It has made him much, much better because he's able to maintain that damage when he's unable to use his ult. But it still suffers from the same thing because you're not getting your ult back in 4 turns. It's delayed for 4 turns, and then you're not getting it back for probably 4 or 5 turns. So that's 8 or 9 turns where you can't ult or gain ult, or ult for 4 turns. And then you can't ult for another 4 or 5 turns. And this only lasts 4 turns. It's very good, very powerful move, but he's not as good for these long fights that we have to do. And because of this cooldown, he's especially bad at sweep. That cooldown completely screws him over and ruins his viability in sweep. I believe people have done it, but very specific and very built. This guy was unable to complete floor 86, which we were stuck on for a very long time. I think extremely high investment Yutas could beat it, but without his SP buff, you're going to have a really hard time beating any higher floors with him. Early game, he will nuke extremely hard because that 2000% is crazy. That matters a lot. You're going to find when you look at units, if they have poor percents, they're a poor unit. There's almost no way around it because even if you have stat buffs, it's just not the same. It's not the same. So, very good unit overall. If you look at him across time, he had a very brutal time where he was a fraud in tower. And again, he's not very good in sweep. But with this SP buff, I think it's made him much better. And he will be good for early tower because of this nuke. It just takes a while to get to compared to like the Gojos who nuke a bit quicker, but it's very powerful. He then does not leave, and then you can use his S3 even if you don't have the SP buff. You can save your CE. It's going to be very good cleanup for anything that doesn't get killed by his ult. Overall, a good unit, but you will find that when you get further in the game, he is worse because of that ult cooldown. Now, for our second godly, we have the JJK0 Geto. He was already one of the goats of this game for a very long time because he has a stat debuff. He has a general stat debuff, which is not very common. It's not common for units to have universal debuffs or buffs. And he was very good for all of your units to use because of this Jujutsu and Taijutsu stat debuff and damage received. Very good for any Jujutsu units. Sorry, I misspoke before. He does not increase the Taijutsu damage received, just Jujutsu. But very good, very good. Especially early game for universal supports. He is a limited unit that only comes when JJK0 celebrations happen. I wouldn't necessarily tell you to summon on him, especially early game, but you might regret not summoning on him for late game. He is a staple of the blue teams right now because he increases the damage received for blue attacks. It's very, very good. It's 50%. So or is it 50%? 20%. Okay, no, one enemy 26%. Yeah, so it's basically 200%. 200% damage taken, and the thing is you can spam the shit out of this. It's 20 CE, which normally units can't spam 20 CE moves, but because he is a Geto, he recovers 10 CE extra per turn. So he gets 20 per turn. And he gets 10 if you defeat anything. You're not going to run into that in tower, but it might be useful in story mode when you have waves. But that SP buff is generational. And he is completely viable, especially for Jujutsu units early game. Now, he has also been used on some floors late game because of this S2 still, because it decreases their taijutsu stat, the enemy's taijutsu stat. It's very good for some later runs, but your main focus late is going to be this S3 SP buffed. Early game, you're going to take advantage of this Jujutsu damage received. It is 50%, so you get up to 150%, and it is universal, so you're going to be able to use it for any of your DPS units that are Jujutsu. Very good unit. They made him even better. You might regret not getting him, but he isn't necessarily a must summon because he only comes back every once in a while and you're not guaranteed to get him. Dagami, the early game GOAT, and even late game, he's still very good. So the reason this guy is so good is he is very unique. Until DE Gojo came out, he was very unique. Even then, he's still somewhat more viable than Domain Gojo in some situations. And that's his ult. His ult puts him into his domain, and it changes his S1 attack and his S3. The main thing is his S1. It increases their damage received by 99% for 3 turns. So like how I was talking about, Geto does 200% per turn. This guy boosts it 99% for 3 turns, so you get 300%, and then his ult gives a flat 45%. So for nuking, especially early game, it is very good because you have 345% damage taken at that last turn. This was the strat for people, and this strat has gone all the way through until late game, and it's gone all the way into sweep, even hard sweep, where this is incredible. It is so good for that big build up to an attack. Domain Gojo does a very similar thing where he increases their damage received by 300% for 4 turns. People have kind of somewhat argued because Domain Gojo will leave, Megumi will stay with you. So early game, he is very, very good. Domain Gojo might replace him on a lot of your teams, but if you're nuking, this is the go-to unit. That's why he's ungodly. Red Yuji. Red Yuji, I kind of slept on him for a while, but he is a very good DPS, extremely consistent, doesn't rely on too much CE crutch, but he has been replaced. He's been replaced, and Toji, SSR Toji, is straight up better than him as well. They worked together very well for a long time. They dual DPS'd him for a very long time. Toji is just straight up better now though with the available supports, and then he was also replaced by this Max CD Yuji, who is incredible, much better than this one, but he's very viable for Red Taijutsu. He has not necessarily fallen off, he's just been replaced by better units over time. I think he will get an SP buff, and that will make him incredible. He's probably going to be a beast after his SP buff, but again, that's not what this list is, and it hasn't happened yet, so it'd just be down to speculation. Hollow Purple Gojo. Again, very similar to Blue Gojo. This guy is going to be your go-to nuker over this Gojo as well, for pretty much any stage up until these higher floors where you have to crutch on type advantage. This guy, though, will nuke through your stages. He has that same 2000% ult that Yuta has, but he has a lot of self buffs compared to Yuta that are much easier to use. It's very good. Big fan of his nuking potential. Gonna be crutching on that a lot early game if you get him. So, Momo. Momo is another godly unit for early game people. She has a very good kit that's versatile, but at the same time, her main thing is going to be her S2. Her S2 increases the damage dealt by 60, I think it's 67%, 68%, almost 69%. It's close between the two numbers. But that's 70%, and then also break damage. A lot of people slept on break damage for a while early game before they started releasing more units with it. But you'll find with break damage, when you break the enemy, it's done for essentially 3 turns. You have the turn that you break it, you won't get attacked, and then 2 turns after that, you won't get attacked. It's very useful. It keeps your team alive a lot more than you think, and you also do more damage in break. So this plus the 70 times to 140%, which it's very quick compared to other buffers. She is only at 2 turns. That's why it's the higher percent, because it's 2 turns, only stacks twice. It does get a little worse once you get higher in the game, because you will have better options. A lot of them are limited options though, limited DPSs, limited supports, so you might not have access to them. She does very good, and then her S3 also increases crit damage. Less useful. You might see people recommend to mix these two together, especially for nuking strats, because the 30% crit damage will be very good for people like Hollow Purple Gojo, who do a lot of crit damage. He has a higher crit damage than normal characters, and his ult will do a lot of damage. But because you're missing out on that 70%, in my opinion, it evens out. They're about the same. Really, whatever you want to do, whatever you think works better is up to you. And then her ult also stuns enemies, and then it also decreases their ult gauge count, which is very good for survivability. She's a very well-rounded unit who carried a lot of people through early game. You're kind of missing out if you don't have her. And she also evades. It's very good. That's why she's in Godly. She's very good early game support. Now, SSR Kamo. Another amazing but type restricted. Our first type restricted. This does not mean he is any worse than these characters in Amazing. It simply means that for his debuffs, they're type restricted debuffs that only work on blue. Early game, this is going to affect you more because you won't have as many units to work with. And he's also an SP buff. So you're not going to be able to crush on it as early game as you want. And it's also type restricted, so it only works on blue floors. But don't sleep on him. Late game, he will be very valuable, especially if you don't have Geto, especially if you don't have Blue Inumaki. He does very good ult damage. I've seen him hit for 30 mil in sweep. He cleans up so well. I love him. He was a great release. When they did his SP buff, he went from like a garbage tier character into an S tier character that carries. Again, type restricted, it's not going to help you as much early game, but he will dominate blue floors, especially with his SP buff. His state buff is very good. State buffs don't get nerfed by tower, and that's a big deal later on. But for your new players, he's very good. Kind of does rely on the SP buff to be a support, but very good overall. Red Nobara. She was the queen of Jiu-Jitsu, specifically Red, but she was the go-to character, especially when Yuta had his issues with his ult gauge. People swapped right over to her, especially with her SP buff. She is an amazing SP buff. Even before SP buff, though, she is very valuable, very viable. Yuta probably is a bit better than her before her SP buff. Afterwards, she is better than him. She can't nuke like he can, but she has very consistent damage where you can just S1, S3, S1, S3. Her damage is based on her nail count, but the majority of her damage comes from the first couple nails. So you just spam 3 nails, and then you slap them with that 900% damage boost at 11 nails. This S3 hits like a truck, and you can just, it's only 25 CE. So you can just swap between S1, S3, you don't run out of CE, and then you throw in your ult every once in a while. Great unit. Somewhat does rely on the SP buff, but it's still, that damage is still there with the SP buff. She just doesn't have the same CE. It costs 50 when you have that, but the SP buff knocks that requirement down, and the SP buff changes it so that the more nails she has, the more CE it costs. It's not, but that doesn't matter when you have her SP buff. because you're only going to get 1 through 4 nails if you're really optimally using her. So you're basically just at that 25. SP buff is just directly better. It makes her significantly better, but she is still extremely viable without it. She is a great pick. She's really good investment for early game. She's one of the few units that can Black Flash on Jujutsu. So her ult is guaranteed Black Flash. It's pretty interesting. And then she gets put in a state buff. That's part of her SP buff, but it's also before her SP buff, where she gets a permanent Jujutsu stat increase and recovers to E. Very good unit, very strong DPS, especially if you don't have Yuta, because he's limited, so you might not have him as a new player. And I wouldn't exactly say he's worth summoning on as a new player anymore. He just isn't as viable as Nobara, and I think eventually we will get a better Red Jujutsu. We got one later on, but he's a little controversial. I think he's gotten better now that he has a stat buff, but still, she's a great unit. Yellow Mechamaru. This guy also had a great resurgence. He is a sub DPS who protects your team while also doing great break damage. He has his S2, which will draw attack for 2 turns, and then alongside drawing, he will counter once per turn. This does rely on his SP buff, but his counter and draw don't necessarily rely on that. He gets only counter before his SP buff. He doesn't get the draw, but once you get that, it's very good on these like mid-tier floors and tower. He will just constantly draw, counter, and then you use this ult. 300% break damage. That is very good. Like, I remember using him 61, 65. He was literally breaking the boss in a single turn. They would recover from their break, I would ult with him, and they would go back into break. It's ridiculous. It does require that SP buff though. That is one downside, is it does require that SP buff. But he's a very strong unit, especially if you don't have all the meta yellow units. Yellow has a lot of strong units, but you're probably not going to have all of them. Yellow Shoko is not in standard yet. Yellow Yaga is great. He is probably one of the best characters in the game, but you're not going to have everyone. And he's a very good option to invest into if you don't have all the meta units. Blue Todo. He is a decent unit. He has been proven to be a lot better than people initially thought he was. People ragged on him a lot, but a lot more clears have been done with him. He can clear normal sweep. I don't believe he can clear hard sweep. I haven't seen a run that I can remember. Just a decent DPS. He has an SP buff, which makes him better, but nothing special. You're not really going to use him unless you have 0 other options, which might be the case. Blue Taijutsu is a very weak category. It's gotten better with the release of 0.2 Gojo, but you're not going to have him if you're looking at this video months down the road. You're not going to have him if you watch this after his banner's gone. I also, again, might not recommend summoning on him, but Todo is there. You might have to use him. There are guides out there for a lot of clears, but he's not a very good unit. Blue Yuji, another blue taijutsu that's just mid. He got an SP buff that made him more viable. His SP buff gives him counts when he attacks a singular enemy, so he's limited essentially to single target floors. But he also has a lot of clears. Again, it's a unit that is there for you if you need him. I wouldn't necessarily invest in him unless you have to. His SP buff is unique where it does not need a level 10 skill. His SP buffs are purely buffs to his character. They are new passives, so it's a little bit easier to get those. But again, you're still investing a lot of mats into him if you're doing that. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Decent DPS, nothing special. You're not going to see him later in the game. Now, the next godly, Mahito. Mahito is an extremely unique character. He has an ult that does percentage-based damage, which I don't believe anyone else does in this game. He reigned king for a lot of players, especially free-to-play players. If you are free-to-play and you got 1,500 domain investigation medals, buy Mahito. There is no reason you should be buying anyone else. Nobody else is anywhere near as valuable as Mahito is. When he uses his ult, it is based on the total HP of the enemy. It takes 15% of the total HP and does that much damage, and then does more damage. I've seen because it's 1300% ult isn't anything to scoff at. It's a pretty decent ult. And then he also does 15% of all. It's AoE. And then if they're a smaller enemy, it'll just straight up kill them, which is great for early tower as well. But this 15% is really good. He does have a slight cooldown technically because he, not even technically, he can't gain ult gauge during his domain, and then he can't for 2 turns afterwards. But this guy was the king of stalling. You would just stall, chip away 15, 15, 15, 15, 15. The enemy isn't able to kill you. You just kill him by chipping away this 15%. If you're stuck on a floor, chances are this guy will save you. He is very good. I hate stalling, but it is undeniable just how amazing this Mahito is. It is, I mean, there's just nothing more to say. That 15% is broken. Red Panda. Red Panda he's a unit. He's a unit of all time. He has an SP buff. He's been buffed. It's he draws attack and prevents damage from being done to him. This is the one that I was thinking of earlier, who has a pretty good stat buff. I believe it's almost up to 900%, but that does require an SP buff to get this properly working. And then it's based on this Kelpa count. Oh, sorry, 300%. It's good. It's not the best unit. He will draw attack and he will reduce his own damage received. So he's a tank essentially, and then you can heal with him. He's very good at that. And I believe there's a lot of floors later in tower where you could take advantage of this and use him. He's very viable, but he falls off later game. He does not going to do what you want. He's just going to get obliterated. But very good early game as a tank. Tank isn't a role you find very often in this game, especially later game, but he will do that for you early game. He's a decent. I wouldn't invest into him too heavily, but overall, decent unit. He will fall off later game. Yellow Nanami. This guy was another early game. Sorry, he was another early game cycle, like when the game first came out, and very early game centric unit because he does damage to all types. He has neutrality to all types with his damage of his S3 and ult. Specifically, I think it's one of the last hits on his ult, not the entire thing. But that's very strong because it means that you can ignore type disadvantage. And he also black flashes quite a lot. He was the king of floor 55, which requires you to black flash in order to do damage to the boss. He's very, very, very solid unit, especially early game. It's very useful to have that type advantage. Type disadvantage, it's a big chunk of why you're not doing damage on floors, and he just straight up ignores that. Very good DPS. Not much more to say about him. He black flashes a lot. He's got a abnormally high HP stat, which was pointed out to me by Indy in our fan parade server. So he's a very solid option for DPS, especially early game. Next we have Teen Gojo, who has reigned supreme as Jujutsu Yellow. Jujutsu Yellow has done so much better with him, and he had this weird release with the Yellow Fuga, where Fuga came out, but he's single target, and then we got floor 90 we got floor 90, which is multi-target, and then we got Sukuna, who's single target. He doesn't excel at that floor. It was a very odd choice, but Teenjo just annihilates it because, especially with the rec bit that came with Sukuna, which increased crit damage, he has very good crit damage. It's AoE. He just annihilates that floor. He annihilates any content he's put into, and then he has that attack immunity as well, which means you're not going to be dying with him. It's a very good unit. He's a very good investment. He is in standard now. If you have him, dump stuff into him. He will carry you very far in this game. Very generic unit though. There's not much more to talk about. Besides that, he just does a lot of damage. He's held up very well. Now we got Teen Geto. Our second type restricted amazing. He has begun to fall off more and more. And that is because his debuffs are split. Not many units have split debuffs. I think that he might be the only one actually, where his S2 will increase Jujutsu damage taken, and then his S3 will increase Taijutsu damage taken. I despise this character. Everyone who's watching this channel probably knows that I like Muta. He is my favorite character in this game, and in probably JJK in general. But this guy has hindered him so much, and I haven't been able to clear hard sweep. I think I can solely blame this guy for not being able to clear hard sweep with Muta. He is not bad when you are using specific DPSs, one type or the other. Very good, in fact, because this guy essentially never runs out of CE, because like the other Geto, he gets a 10 extra CE per turn. You can run out of CE with his skill 3 because it's 25, but when you're mixing in ults and you have supports, you're probably not going to run into a situation where you actually run out of CE. Very solid unit. Very solid unit. Will work for any Jujutsu or Taijutsu unit. He struggles with mixed units, some units that have mixed attacks, because he's not supporting half of it. Multipliers are extremely important in this game, and he is currently hindering 2 DPSs, Muta and the new Nanami. It's just kind of meh. And even Choso, actually, because Choto's S2 is Taijutsu. He's hindering them, all of them, because he only supports one or the other. But even though he only supports one or the other, he is very, very good, because he never runs out of CE, consistently debuffs. He does good damage. His ult increases break damage taken, does good break damage itself. He's a very solid unit. I do want him to be replaced though, because he is hindering units that are coming out, and he is showing his age because he's not as good of a support. He's not doing as much damage. Specifically, Jujutsu is way worse because this thing only does 300%, well, compared to his Taijutsu, which does almost 600%. Big difference there. Toji. Toji is probably one of the most consistent units in the game since his release. He has reigned supreme in Taijutsu. Like I said, he's been comboed with Red Yuji for a long time until we got better supports. But this guy's kit is really good. He specifically does something unique, which is he's able to strip buffs from bosses, which makes him very viable on especially specific floors where bosses buff themselves a lot or bosses make themselves invisible. He removes that attack nullification and removes a buff. He does very good damage, especially crit damage. He has higher crit damage than most units. Most have 50%. This guy's 120%. Especially his ult, it's a little less, it's 80%, but it removes that attack nullification, removes the buff from all enemies, and then does 15% 100 Taijutsu to all enemies. AoE Taijutsu is pretty rare in this game. He does it extremely well. He heals himself every turn. He can evade single target hits. He can grant hit immunity. Like, it's great. He ignores guaranteed hit from domains and stuff. He's a very good unit. He has a lot of self-stat buffs. Very solid unit. Very good damage. He's in standard now, so you can hypothetically A5 him. He's going to carry you through all the Taijutsu content in the game. All of it. Later game, you know, you need those specific types, but this guy's very solid DPS who has held up very well over the years. Now, next, the Blue Miwa. She's another case of a unit with a specific use case. She's ass in general. You're never going to use her, except on specific stages like floor 66, where you want to use her taunt to protect your team. And she can do that. But even then, she's kind of bad at that. Don't invest into her unless you have to. Not a good unit. Green Saki. Green Saki, she had a resurgence when we got floors 61 to 80 because floor 67 specifically, that floor was a nightmare for a lot of people and she was a solution. But that does require an SP buff and she doesn't do the most damage in the game. decent unit, has some use. Wouldn't necessarily invest into her, especially her SP buff, unless you have to. But she's there if you need taijutsu. Yellow Yaga. This guy is the GOAT of the game. This guy has reigned supreme ever since he released, and he has done it so well. The reason this guy's kit is so good is because while technically you could put him in type restricted, because some of his debuffs are limited to yellow team, majority of his debuffs are not related to yellow. I believe it's 30%, 10%. Yeah, so 30% taijutsu and jujutsu damage received for 3 turns. So you're going up to 90%. 16% of that is going to be like the additional 45% total going to specifically yellow. But it's very, very good because that mostly applies to all of your units. His ult does the same thing. It's all enemies restricted to yellow specifically, so his ult's not going to do it for everyone, but his S3 will. And then his auto skill, which gives you a permanent 46% Jujutsu Taijutsu stat increase. This is amazing because if any of you know who SR Yaga is, who we'll get to eventually, that is essentially a free SR Yaga S2 every turn, no added cost. He just does that, and it does it for everyone. This guy has held up so well over the years, being a support for literally everyone. Hard sweep is notoriously hard, it's hard sweep, and then this guy is probably one of the few units you can run off type in that mode because he does support teams. It's incredible. Another part of his kit is that he is taijutsu and jujutsu, so he's a mixed unit. Mixed units will have an advantage later in tower and technically early in tower as well, but they don't have specific restrictions early tower. Late tower, you are either in a taijutsu floor or a jujutsu floor, with one exception of floor 85. But so if you're on a 90% taijutsu restricted floor, even though it says that he does 150%, actually it's not his S3, hold on. Yeah, combined damage. So that 150% taijutsu and jujutsu, that is 300% that is unaffected by that debuff. So instead of doing minus 90% on your taijutsu, it is doing the full amount. This is very crucial later on in these floors. Combined damage units are extremely good. More of them are coming out, they're more viable, and they're very versatile. SSR Yaga is by far the most versatile unit in this game. If you have him, go invest into him now and start using him. Pretty much at any point in the game. This is for new players, old players, good players, bad players, whales, and free-to-plays. This guy is the unit to use if you have him. There is almost never a situation in this game where you will not run this guy. Can't understate just how good he is. I'm even going to move him to the front just to flex how good he is. That doesn't mean that this is ordered. I just want him at the top because he is the GOAT of this game. To an underwhelming note, Blue Nanami. He's there. He's a DPS, I guess. That's all. Green Maki. She's pretty good. She debuffs taijutsu damage received. So you have them stat debuffs there. She does decent damage. She had some use early game. She has a few use cases late game. She's an alright option to invest into if you don't have any other Green Taijutsu options. Like if you have Green Yuji, I wouldn't invest into her unless you absolutely have to. He will be better than her in every single way, essentially. Red Mai. Red Mai had a resurgence as well. She's been a pretty good unit for most of her lifetime. She increases damage received generally. She has a 2-turn window where she does it very well. A unique thing about her is most of her damage received is follow-up. So when your unit lands an attack, she has a chance to follow up and apply 30% damage increase received. She's a good unit. She's a very good option if you don't have any other damage increase received. because early game doesn't have the restrictions of debuff versus buff, you probably won't use her over someone like SSR Momo. Momo will be a better option for her. Now we got Blue Inumaki. Blue Inumaki is probably one of the best units in this game. He has Reign Supreme when it comes to blue teams. You essentially won't find a floor where you don't use this guy unless we're talking late game blue buff floors. He has a very high debuff amount. He debuffs up to 200%, taijutsu and jutsu received in one move. His ult is extremely powerful. He has, I think it's a 1500% ult, and it also debuffs on ult. That is something important you want to look out for specifically on debuffers and buffers, is does their ult maintain their gimmick? Inumaki's does 1500%, and he continually debuffs during that. He's a very solid unit. He is a staple of blue teams, especially in sweep. This guy reigns supreme. You should probably invest into him. But again, he is type restricted. Type restricted isn't necessarily the best thing early game because you're not going to have access to as many characters. Now, Green Nobara. Fallen off quite a lot, but she's a decent DPS. Her DPS is based on the number of debuffs you apply to your opponent. It's a unique unit, but she just doesn't really excel at anything. She clears normal sweep. I don't believe she clears hard sweep. She relies on debuffs, and sweep resets debuffs every time you clear the third, like the phases. Phase 3 and it resets. Phase 7 and it resets. So she's there. She's an option if you need her for green jutsu, but like you'd never run her over like Hollow Purple Gojo or some of the future units we'll get into here. She's alright. Nothing special. Nothing more to say about her. Now we have Green Megumi. Green Megumi is a unit that personally I slept on for a while. I don't think he's as incredible as other people say necessarily, but he does very good, very consistent jujutsu damage, and he also debuffs at the same time. A lot of units that you'll find people running as DPSs when they don't have all the options available to them are good in working because they continually will either buff or debuff while doing damage. That's kind of what this Megumi does, is you're probably not going to run one as a sub DPS. Sub DPSs don't necessarily do the best in this game unless you don't have options otherwise. You want to support a main attacker generally. But this Megumi does very good damage. His Divine Dogs, when you summon them, it makes it so that he has better CE management, very easy to use, very good damage. Don't let anyone tell you he's not good, because he is good, but he just gets outclassed by the units later on. Alright, Yellow Kaito. He is another amazing, but type restricted. You could argue that you are going to use him not on type for his CE gain. His S2 gives 14 CE at max level to all of his allies every turn. That is very useful. But he typically is just the worst option to run. The option to run if you don't have all the good units. But if you're going to run him, he will do extremely well. He's a very fun unit to use. You're going to have infinite CE running him. But off color, you might as well just use our Kaito. We'll get to him. He's probably the better option off color. But SSR Kaito is very good. Very slept on unit. Now, Zone Yuji. Zone Yuji is an incredible unit, but comparably to other units, he doesn't seem to have as much. He has his gimmick, which means that after he ults, for 2 turns, you get to attack twice. Very, very strong unit. Been a staple of Yellow Taijutsu. He's pretty much was the only option for Yellow Taijutsu until we got Toji later on, who's... people don't realize how good Toji is, especially since he's standard. You can A5 him. Zone G is incredible, though. His break damage is ridiculous when he uses, I believe it's his S3. He does amazing break damage. You're going to break the boss every time he ults. But he has started to fall off compared to other units. You don't actually use his ult technically to do the main damage. The main damage he does is his dual attack mode after his ult. Very good unit, but I just don't think he's up to par with the other modern units. I think Toji wasn't necessarily a replacement for him, but I think we might be getting a Yuta. Since we got Calling Games Yuji, I think we're going to get a Calling Games Yuta, who very well could be a yellow taijutsu. So I think that might be his replacement. But right now, if you have him, he's very good yellow taijutsu. Zero complaints. His CE rotation is awesome. Well, because you just essentially only use your CE during that ult and then the following 2 turns. And then you just S1 the rest of the time. Very, very good unit. He can 10 out of 10 hard sweep. He's going to clear all the yellow content in the game currently. He might fall off later on. I just think eventually he's going to be replaced, and that time is coming because he's over a year old at this point, and we're getting the 2.5 ante. So we'll have to see what comes. Very good investment though. Domain Gojo, the OG Domain Gojo. This guy broke the game. He straight up broke the game for about probably over a year until they added content that specifically targeted him to prevent him from being so good. This guy, his ult gives 4 turns of 300% damage taken increase. Now we were talking about Megumi earlier, who does 345%, but it's only on that last turn. Gojo, on the other hand, has 300% flat for 4 turns straight. The amount of damage you're doing during those 4 turns is ridiculous. He is by far the most broken unit in the game, who, while being broken, they had to specifically target him and create new things for tower and hard sweep to block this guy from being there. It is crazy how good he is, and if you have access to him, invest in him, pop his ult, use your DPS's ult, and you clear the stage. That's literally all it is. It is crazy because he decreases their ultimate skill count by 1. He prevents them from gaining ult gauge for 4 turns. He stuns them guaranteed for 2 turns, possibly stunning them for 4 turns total, while increasing their damage received by a flat 100%. And then the more turns you have left, you get an extra 200% up to. So if you do it at turn count 6, you get max of 300%. He does leave. His damage is very good, and his S2 is very good for the damage dealt decrease. It's you're not really focusing on these 3 things. It's mainly his ult that makes him good, but you can straight up run him as a DPS essentially for the 10 turns that he is active. His 700% S3, and then that also increases Jujutsu stat for 3 turns. Incredible. Very good unit. Very broken early game. He has to get targeted late game, and even then he still excels at his job for the most part. You're still running him on some floors. Amazing unit. If you have him, this should be your #1 investment priority because he works for everyone early game and still reigns good in late game. Invest in him. So, Miguel went from being one of the worst units in the game because he was a limited unit that did fuck all, to a unit that creates a whole new strategy for, not strategy, he revolutionized Taijutsu Blue because he became a stat debuffer, which we did not have for Taijutsu, which you could run Inumaki, but his damage is Jujutsu. So on these type restricted floors where your Jujutsu is reduced by 90%, Inumaki was debuffing, but he was not doing any damage, which we also had really bad DPSs at the time, so you were doing no damage. His debuff was bad compared to the debuff that he provides while doing damage. Miguel went from a D tier, F tier character to an S tier character overnight with his SP buff. But again, he relies on that SP buff, and he's also a limited character. Chances are you don't have him you're not gonna get him. He's very good, but I don't know if you should go for him, because later on we're gonna have better options and you only have so many cubes. So moving on to Blue Sukuna, another godly meta-changing unit that completely flipped this game on its head. Sukuna, main thing that makes him so broken is his bleed damage that he introduced into this game. It's a real first dot. Blue Jogo technically has dot. He not as good, nowhere near as good. He can be used to an extent, but Sukuna's dot is unique because it's bleed damage, which will go through type disadvantage. Even if you're on a floor where blue is weak, that bleed damage will go through as neutral. There's no disadvantage there. That's very important, and it means that you can use him for essentially the first 70, 80 floors of the game, and he will break through almost all of them. When you get to 61 plus, off-type colors do lose ult gauge, and you can't ult with them, so it's not the same anymore. Technically, you could probably maybe still do it on some of the lower floors, but 1 through 60, this guy annihilates, completely destroys. He is a ridiculously strong Jujutsu character. The one thing that has held him back and continues to hold him back is that blue does not have a stat buffer. He has his bleed damage, but that's based off his Jujutsu stat. So not having a proper modern Jujutsu buffer means that his bleed is kind of crappy, and then his main damage is also heavily affected by that. He doesn't have any proper or strong stat self buffs. So you tend to run into issues with him where he just isn't doing the same kind of damage that unit like Blue Yuta is, or 0.2 Domain Gojo. They are more self-sustaining. A lot of modern units are more self-sustaining, and Sukuna was at the edge of that. They don't really have any buffs that properly support himself. You can use him between 1 and 60 incredibly well. He does fall off, but he will annihilate the first 60 floors of this game. He can be used for original sweep. The hard sweep, I don't believe... I have seen clears with him, but they're very high investment clears, and they are RNG based. Not like the other colors where it's a little bit of RNG because of how the bosses work. Blue is significantly harder, a lot of people would say, because you don't have a proper stat buffer. But Sukuna's kit is amazing. He's my first unit that I A5'd, and everything about him is well-rounded for the time when he came out. Not just well-rounded, actually, it's broken. Because he's healing himself every turn, essentially. It has a 20% chance. But then if you get hit, you have a higher chance of healing, even more. It's incredible because he just would never die. Whenever he gets crits, he recovers cursed energy, which was extremely good because his S3 is extremely expensive. It starts out lower, but the more CE you have, the more it costs, the more damage it does. His S3 at 90 CE does 1200 damage. That's more than some SSR unit's entire ult. And then he has bleed that inflicts on top of that afterwards, which is type neutral. Ridiculously good unit. He is going to carry you through the game if you have him. He is a limited unit. Again, you're going to have a situation where he may come back on a rerun, but there are modern replacements that do his job better. And I would not say, you should summon for him because he's so broken on all these 1 through 60 floors. Once you get past 61, especially when you hit 81, which specifically targets him, they made it so that the boss, if it's inflicted with dot, will heal 3 million per turn. It's ridiculous. I think it's 3 million per dot, actually. I think it's something around 40 million across a couple turns that it heals. So you can't clear it with him. It's literally impossible to clear it with him. They wanted people to go after the new Blue Yuta. I think that's pretty much entirely why they did it. It is maybe not entirely why they did it. Maybe they wanted to make a floor where you just don't want to bypass it using this guy, because otherwise he would do very well on the floor. But just that singular restriction of the dot making the boss heals means you can't use him there. And Blue Yuta came out, demolishes that floor, demolishes every other floor because he has that state buff. He has just fallen off. I think if he gets an SP buff, he will be back on top again, because That type neutral damage is extremely important. It's not as possible in Tower anymore because of the limitations that they added, where past a certain point, your off-type units cannot gain ult gauge. They lose it every turn, so you just can't ult. It's less useful now, but this guy was extremely good. It's still good. He's just not going to do as good when you get to higher floors. Green Miwa. Green Miwa was one of the first units that I also A5'd because I'm a big Miwa fan. She is a pretty decent taijutsu SSR for green, completely outshined by essentially every other taijutsu unit that came out after her. Her buffs are based on a number of stacks that she has, and any unit that has to get stacks tends to be crap. Now there are exceptions. Urame just came out and she is very good, but she needs stacks. It's less stacks though, and she still does part of her ability even without full stacks. Miwa, on the other hand, is essentially a very crappy unit until you hit those 20 stacks, 20 battle stacks. She is in the great category. Nothing to write home about. I think an SP buff might make her very viable on floors if she has a better taunt, because her stats aren't bad and her multipliers aren't bad either. She just doesn't have a very good kit. It doesn't work very well for her because her kit, she only has one draw attack, and that's after ult. And that's just not enough. You're not doing the ult enough to warrant that. To be fair, she'll get it quicker and quicker as time goes on, but as the tower floors have changed and you need less, you have less turns to clear, like after turn 30 you lose, or after turn 30 they gain so much damage that you just can't survive it. It's just not as viable, and for the same reasons of that time limit, she's not good in sweep either. I've used her in some of the higher floors for some fun clears. She's not horrible, but she's not good. An SP buff might change her. I've always said that I joke around and in the fan server that, like, just wait for the generational SP buff and she's going to be broken. I think it's only like 90% sarcasm, because I think if they really wanted to, they could make her a very good unit, but we'll just have to see, because they do SP buffs like Green Nanami, where that did nothing. I mean, yeah, he's better, but you're not going to run him ever in your entire life unless he is the only option or only SSR you have. Muda, another unit that I love, big fan. He isn't amazing. People are going to tell me that I'm glazing him because I'm the Muda guy, but he is hollow purple Gojo that doesn't leave. His ult is also that 2000% when you hit the max stacks. His kit essentially revolves around getting his Muda or Mechamaru counts. Again, units that have these count base or build ups do have a disadvantage in modern tower and modern sweep, and it's why I haven't cleared modern sweep, because he's extremely disadvantaged in that, not just his ult thing. There's some other factors that play into that, but he's a very strong unit. He can do, like I said, up to that 2000% at 10 stacks. It starts at 1000, you get 10 stacks, it doubles it to 2000%. His S3 is also very powerful. It starts out at that low number, but then doubles with that and goes up to, I think it's about 670% or something like that, 680. Hits extremely hard because he has pretty decent self buffs. He, at the start of battle, increases his own break damage by 130%. That is very important in modern runs. That break damage prevents your teammate from getting hit. It prevents you from dying. It gives more damage to your team. And then if they're in the break state, which he's good at getting people into the break state, he increases his own damage for 3 turns. He also has a base increase of, it says 60% here, but he counts to his own. He's self-included, so it goes up to 90%. It's very, very decent buff. A lot of self buffs are more jujutsu, and those are more viable, but he has a damage increase. It's not too ridiculously good because you get a lot of damage increase just from the SP. The SP tree, when you have those 2 nodes at the top that give you I think it's a total of 15% when you get both of them, and that's across 4 units on the field, so you get a 60% bonus just flat out. So, but that means when you're running Muda, you get a full 100 and like what 140% or something like that. Very good, because that means he has a full essentially buff cycle for some units, like support units, just flat out. Unfortunately, because of these stacks and the S3 costing so much, he is harder to use. You have to know how to manage the CE if you want to use him, and because of his mixed damage, he is susceptible to the fact that Geto cannot support both of his parts. His ult's good, his S3 is not going to do as much, and these two moves do essentially no damage, so he really lacks damage until you get to his S3 when it's high count, and his ult when he's high count. That's his weakness. I think an SP buff might change that. Maybe they'll make one of these two moves do more damage, and then he's more viable across the run rather than just building up to a nuke every time. But like I said, he is a hollow purple Gojo that does not leave. Moving on to Yellow Shoko. Yellow Shoko is our first godly but restricted. She is an incredible stat buffer who also provides healing and ult gauge charge rate. That was pretty much, I think, the first unit to provide ult gauge charge rate. And as we've realized, it makes a huge difference when these runs are shorter and shorter. You want to get to your ult quicker and quicker. Her heal is pretty good. It's a lot. It's a 60% of her Jujutsu stat, which is pretty decent because she has a decently high stat. It's not as high as Teen Shoko is, but she has the advantage of where she has 3 turns where she heals all allies by 30%. The only downside to this is that it doesn't actually work if she's at that low health. So she can't heal herself and the team if she goes too low. This kind of can fuck you over because you then will have to use one of these heals, and if your whole team's low, you can only heal one person with this. That is her only downside, I would say, because she has really good stat buffs and is also increasing their damage received, so you got 2 different multipliers there. And then even her ult is pretty good. It doesn't maintain her stat buffs, something that Teen Shoko's ult does, but it does give you that ult skill gauge charge rate, 30% for 2 turns. That's a free unity. That's very good. It also increases their damage dealt, so you're not just losing out on a bunch of buffs, but this is a very good ult. It's very good in the cycle of Zonji. This helps him get back to his ult quicker, which means he can go into his dual attack state quicker. She's a very good unit. She is limited to buffing yellow units, though. That's why she's in that type restricted category. But she is one of the best units that you can have for your yellow team, if not the most important. Yaga is obviously better all around, but Shoko might be more effective early game. Healers also. That's going to be a big thing, is you're not going to die as fast. Very good unit. First godly type restricted. Blue Maki. Blue Maki was a weird release. Everybody clowned on her. I think because nobody typically cares about the Maki units. But she's actually a pretty good unit. She does a lot of damage when you properly use her. She also has a pretty interesting skill cycle. It's very different from others because you can flip into different states. It's not actual states, but her different skills give her different options to then chain different kinds of moves, because this one gives her ult gauge rate, this one gives her taijutsu stat, this one, because okay, no, it is a state, so you get a state which gives you some additional buffs, stat buffs. If she's in the other state, when she transforms into this one, she gets a stat buff. If she's an all-out full sword, when she transforms into this one, she gets 10%. It's an interesting kit. Her ult is a little bit low. 150%, 1050%, 1300% isn't the greatest ult. Sorry, 1200% is not the greatest ult. But Maki's typically, especially because she has that ult gauge increase, the rate increase on her S1, you get to it quicker. It's definitely not as slow, but that 1752 is a very high ult. They offset that by giving her the ult charge rate, but it's not necessarily enough sometimes, especially because this move does not do as much damage as the other two moves do. These moves are very good. Like this 600% with stat buffs, with critical hit damage increases, very good moves. But you kind of have to switch between stuff, or else you're lacking self buffs and you're not going to get to your ult quick enough. decent unit. She does a lot of clears. I've seen there's this guy on the fan server named Commentator who is the Maki person who just cleared hard sweep with her pretty recently. She did 110 million damage across the run, which is higher than average, I would say, for most DPSs. Usually you see around 100 million for the DPS. She's a good unit. People kind of slept on her. She's in a standard now, so you can get her higher awakenings, which will be important for her. But overall, she's a pretty good unit. She's going to do exactly her job well. You're limited to taijutsu, though. Blue taijutsu itself was kind of crappy until Miguel, but then you don't... Like I said, Miguel's a limited unit. He has very small, specific use cases. I don't know if you should summon on him, but they work very well together. Mei Mei. She was a major disappointment. Mei Mei isn't necessarily a bad unit, but she suffers from her kit, just like Muta, being mixed. Her ult specifically is also mixed. It's not just her entire kit. I think her main damage source is going to be her S2. Or, no, sorry, no, S3. It hits really hard, 600%, and it's an AoE move. Usually AoE moves are weaker because, you know, you're hitting everyone. Her AoE is very hard hitting though, but then you have her ult. It's only 400% taijutsu, and then it's 1400% jujutsu. It becomes awkward trying to choose a rec bit for her. Her own rec bit is very good for her, and actually her rec bit is really good for Mahito as well, a new red Mahito. But her kit just, it feels weird. She does decent damage. Her ult is mixed though, so you run into issues with that. And she has a pretty low ult, so you can kind of spam it, but it's not good enough. Maybe once she's in standard, maybe she'll have uses at A5 or something like that, but right now she is worse than every other option that you could possibly run. People have cleared hard sweep with her, but that's with a lot of sub DPS potential from Mahito and Team Nanami and stuff like that. So she works. She's not the greatest unit. A little bit of a disappointment. If this was mixed instead of if it was mixed, it would be way better, because then you could do full damage on both floors. But then you got this S3 that doesn't do mixed damage. She's a weird unit, doesn't really fit in. I wish that her ult wasn't like this. Ino. I like Ino. He's not the greatest unit though. His kit is also very similar to Zone Yuji's kit. He has a state buff that he enters, and you actually stay in it for a majority of his run. You kind of want to get into it right away, as soon as possible. That's Spirit Turtle State. Use his S3 that gets him into his state, and then you got 4 turns it lasts for. Ideally, you want to use it again before it runs out, because you remove the debuff that it gives you. When you initially go into this, it gives you a 30% damage dealt decrease. You can't take that away, can't be removed, except when you use it again before it runs out, it'll give him increased damage by 30%, and it also reduces his cursed energy cost. Very strong unit. Again, suffers from the fate of being a bad combo of jujutsu and taijutsu. His dual state means that you can hit pretty hard, because that's 900%. You use 2 of these that are only 10 CE when you're in your second state. Spam this shit. It works really well, and it increases his damage dealt when you use it. He's a very good unit. He's just not strong enough. I can't exactly pinpoint why. He doesn't really have any stat buffs for himself. That might be part of the problem. He doesn't have any buffs. He only gets this one, but that again is negated by being in the state itself. So they just like cancel each other out. You get buffs in his moves, but it's damaged increased is not the greatest buff to have, as I explained earlier. Your team has a base good amount because of SP. He's a fun unit. I haven't seen hard sweep clear with him or anything like that, but I would expect maybe once we get a stat buffer for blue, I would expect to see one, because a lot of people like Ino, and I think he's pretty cool. Hollow Purple Gojo. So I was debating on whether or not he should be in Godly, because I was just thinking about him. at a higher level in the high tower hard sweep. He does function decent in those, but then I remembered that you can infinitely stall by just not ulting. He keeps his infinity state if you don't enter this change skill. If you don't use his S3, he goes into honor mode, he loses that infinity. But if you don't go into it, you just forever can have attack immunity. So floors 1 through 80, essentially you can just stall out. Even though you're not meant to stall out 61 to 80, this guy allowed people to stall out. And you can do that for this entire tower. He's very good. He hits very hard. The problem is when you get up to these higher tower floors, you're running into an issue where it's actually even not enough. And then as you get up to the floor 70 to 80, like I said, it's not enough. You start having a hard time actually finishing it because there is a turn cap. People don't necessarily know that. There is a turn cap, and he doesn't always do enough damage to the bosses when he has a damage decrease or is on type disadvantage. But anywhere below 80, this guy is going to work fantastic. When you go above 80, he takes too long to build up. He does good damage, but he needs these cores. It's similar to Muda, where you got to build up cores or stacks before you ult. And based on the number of cores, you get a certain amount of buffs. But when he ults, just like Muda, you lose your stacks / cores. And then you got to rebuild them up. His is longer than Muda's. It's about 2-3 turns longer, which can be a problem. Especially because ideally you want to use his self buff before ult. But that means that you need to do 8 turns of S2 for that core count. And then 2 turns of his self buff before you ult. It's very hard to get 10 turns of doing mediocre damage, and then your other team there's no break, so you're not protecting your team. And then he does good damage with his ult, extremely good damage. 1800% is a lot because of all the self buffs that he has, but he's just fallen off because that's way too long. Hard sweep, he is a cleanup character essentially. I think most runs you will run a DPS in the front. Or, sorry, not the front. You have your DPS in the back, you give them a taunt memory, and then you want to kill that DPS after they do enough damage to the boss. You swap in this Gojo, he ults the last phase, clears the entire thing in a single ult. He's going to do very well, especially early game, but he will fall off, and there have been more options introduced that are competition for him. Green Shoko, our second type-restricted godly. She is very similar to Yellow Shoko, but her kit is ever so slightly different. Makes her more of a healer and less of a buffer. So, her main thing is that during her S2, every time you use it, she gets stealth. So she's not going to get attacked. That seems like a good thing at first, but what ends up happening is that she doesn't get hit. And the other 3 characters get hit more often, and they're closer to dying. Her healing is very, very, very good because it's a flat 40%. It's not based on her stat like Yellow Shoko. It's based on flat healing, which is much better. It also reduces buffs, which is a unique thing. We saw some use of that in some of the power floors that had poison and such, but it hasn't been as useful as we hoped when we read her kit initially. She has her own self healing. But like I said, when you use her S2, ideally you want to be spamming her S2. She has stealth, and that means that she can't get hit. So unless it's an AoE attack, she's not going to have to heal herself. Now, something great about this that Yellow Shoko doesn't have is that her ult will heal everyone while maintaining her stat buffs. This is very good for these long-term runs where you don't want to run out of CE, because you got to spam this, but it costs 20 CE, eventually you're going to run out. Her ult will maintain it. You get to combo with people, and then you'll recover at cursed energy. And then you can just keep going with S2. It's a very good rotation. She can heal herself. She heals everyone. The only thing is that because of this stealth status, you're going to have your other teammates getting hurt more It feels more consistent. But she's a very good unit, very good stat buffer. The second one we received, that was a new stat buffer. I love her. Very good unit, that's why she's in Godly. There's essentially nothing to complain about besides the stealth, which it's not a big deal really at the end of the day. Alright, so moving on to Teen Nanami. This guy was an incredible release. He did change up Red quite a lot. He's a very good unit who does a lot of damage while sustaining very high buffs. So he's going to go into Godly but restricted, again because his type buffs are restricted to Red. But he is an incredible character, changed up Red. I think only until Mahito did we see someone better than him, because Megumi was good, but he didn't feel very strong. He really just brought in an adequate debuff percentage for stat debuffs, but he doesn't do very much damage. You kind of have to maintain his CE to a certain extent. Nanami though is very self-sufficient. His S1 will increase his crit rate, which is important because every time he crits he gets CE. It's quite a lot of CE too. I mean, 5 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're critting every single turn, that adds up pretty fast. And I say every turn, yes, maybe there's a turn you won't. But he has a very good crit rate, 40%. And then these also hit for 3 hits. So you have 3 chances to hit that 40% while he has a higher crit rate. He has a base built-in higher crit rate and crit damage. He has an overtime skill, which means at the start of his next turn, you get a permanent stat buff, permanent crit damage increase, and then you get 30 CE back. It's very good timing for him because if you're not bringing a CE memory around that 6th turn, if you're spamming skills, that's probably when you're going to start to run out, especially when you have to use this S3. Now the S3 isn't too bad because it has a cooldown of 4 turns. You can only use it once every 4 turns, and it gives a 90% damage dealt increase. When you stack his ult of 50%, 90%, and 2 of these, you're doing so much damage. It's higher than a lot of other buffers, and that's why he was so good. It's because he was doing damage, maintaining his own CE, and buffing the hell out of your team. Very good unit. Very good solid place in red teams. He's the go-to guy for buff floors. I think Mahito... Okay, this is going to be controversial because I had an argument about this with Indy in the server, where the ideal team for red sweep, in my opinion, does not include Nanami. It includes Momo now because she's a stat buffer. Yes, the DPS is in that mode because you got Ramji, the Rampage Yuji, and Mahito doesn't have any self stat buffs. I think using those stat buffs for Mahito makes it better clear than using Nanami to get more damage increase, which adds with Mahito's damage taken increase. I think this is purely hypothetical though, because they both have the same 10 turn clear. So it's just hypotheticals that don't matter at this point. But there's just something about him that I don't enjoy. I don't enjoy using him for some reason, but he's a very good unit. Don't let that distract you from that fact that he's a crazy good unit. There's a reason he's in Godly. Very consistent, manages his own CE. He's going to blow through any red floor that you put him in front of. Very good unit. Dagon. I despise Dagon. He is so CE hungry. He does basically no damage. And yes, he's a free unit. I understand that. I understand that he is a metal unit. But we waited so long for this guy to come out just for him to be ass. His art, don't get me wrong, I love his art. Him as a unit is ass. 97%? Like, yeah, I get it changes into 200% and it's AoE, but it's 200%. You're in a domain, it should be higher than 200%. It is AoE, but it's just not, no, it's not enough. His S2, 400% AoE. That's a pretty good move. It increases his own Jujutsu stat, and it's a Jujutsu move. It also increases their damage received. It's not a bad move. It starts out as a decent buff that increases the ult gauge charge rate. You can go up to 90% if you use it 3 times. Not recommended, but that's a pretty good kit. Especially when you then take that he has stop action for early game content. This will apply. Damage received, again, you're getting multiple different factors, different buffs. And then he has dot. It's not as good as the other Dot characters in this game, but it is Dot. Dot is good overall, but it's just not as good. His domain, it's longer than other ones. It's 6 turns, and he does have some decent buffs during that. It's just, he's not good enough. He doesn't have enough stat buffs to himself to warrant the amount of damage he's doing. It's just very bad damage. You need a lot of dupes for him to be somewhat viable. I saw someone trying to clear 90 with him, and they just couldn't do it. I wouldn't be surprised if someone finds a way, especially if he's A5, but like, these stats are crap. He takes too long to build up to his domain, because then you have a cooldown after your domain, and he has a pretty high ult gauge, almost 2,000%, or 2,000 ult gauge. It's not a good combo. Disappointing release. I would not buy him. Do not buy him. Not a good release. Bad. Choso, another godly but type restricted. Choso was one of the first standard units that they released that was truly goated, because Teen Nanami, Shoko, Teen Shoko specifically, they're limited releases for the 1.5 Annie. Teen Normal Shoko, she's very good. She's also standard, but it was gonna be a long time till she comes out. She's a buffer. It's not the same thing as having a cool damage dealing debuffer. Choso's kit is very good. He's very similar to Nanami, where he's extremely self-sufficient, and if you bring a CE memory, you're literally never running out of CE. It's incredible. He does a great job. His damage is mixed to an extent, so you do suffer from the same thing where Geto is not supporting them properly. He's not doing good enough damage technically, but a majority of his kit is going to be Jujutsu, so you can somewhat ignore that. It's just that you can't really use him as well on the Taijutsu floors. One, because its S2 costs 30 CE. It's very hard to maintain that compared to his S2, S3, which is 20 CE. But he does have that same kind of overtime thing where at the start of his 8th turn you get 30 CE and increases his stat. Good. It's extremely good unit, extremely good damage, because he has that 1300 damage, and then he has a crap ton of dot poison. This poison is clutch. It saved multiple runs of mine where he's going to wipe the team, the enemy's going to wipe the team, and then Choso's dot either puts him into break or kills the enemy and finishes them off. He also has disruption, which is going to help early game because that prevents them from attacking potentially. It's not perfect, but it's there. It's extra. It's nice. A little cherry on top for his kit. But like I said, very self-sustaining CE wise. He is a very good damage. He was one of the first Nanami was good damage. Choso was incredible damage while being a standard unit. Very good. I love Choso. I hope that we get a new stat debuffer, because that would mean he gets to shine even more. Moving on to Toji. Toji is someone that was very mixed reviews when he came out. I know that Giku hates this Toji and does not respect him at all compared to Zonji, which I get, because Zonji essentially does what he does at A1. He does this at A5, Zonji can do it at A1. But he has some advantages over Zonji, and that's going to be that he has more consistent damage. He does ramp up. He has stacks. Don't forget that stacks mean you're a little bit worse because it takes time to get to a point where you can do proper damage, and you need to survive that time. But he has bleed on some of his attacks, especially his ult. It's a good amount of bleed, 40%, 5 stacks of 40%. It's very good. He does very good damage. He's a Toji unit, so he has a lot of self-stat buffs, and then his combo count gives him even more buffs. I don't think that he's as bad as everyone makes him out to be. I think he is not as good as some people make him out to be. He's a solid standard release for if you do not have Zonji, this Toji is going to do everything you need him to do adequately. I like him personally. He's fun to use, but I do understand the criticisms when it comes to his kit and his release. Naobito, the GOAT! He's unfortunately not the GOAT. Naobito is a pretty interesting release in my opinion. I was pretty happy to get him A2 when he released. I typically, at that point, I decided to get A1 units because I didn't want to spend anything more than that. I like having the CE on A2, but it's just not worth it. The money in this game is crazy. The amount you have to spend to pity a unit is ridiculous. But Naobito is good. He is a good unit. Don't let people fool you and tell you he's not a good unit, because especially early game when you don't have to do harder content that he might struggle in, he's going to be carrying your ass. And that's because of his break damage increase. He does a crazy amount of break damage with his projection sorcery. It's awesome. I love just destroying the enemy's break bar, putting him into break every couple turns. He does good damage. He has a follow-up. He has a weird stat buff that he applies to his allies on follow-up. It's only 30% at best if he's continually following up. It's not something you can rely on for stat buffs, especially because his damage isn't good enough to warrant bringing him over an additional better support. But I like Naobito. He has potential for an SP buff that would be good. He has a unique Falling Blossom emotion, which means that if he's in an enemy domain, he gets 10 cursed energy more. Or sorry, no. It costs 10 energy to use to activate it, but he reduces his own damage read by 40%. 40% is a lot. That's a good amount of protection for himself. It doesn't apply to other teammates. Kusakabe is very good for protecting against domains, but this is more of like protecting himself. I like this unit. There's not much more to say because unfortunately he isn't as good as I'd like him to be, but don't let people tell you he is bad. He is a decent unit. Don't summon for him if he's on a rerun or something like that. But I love Naobito, king of this game in spirit. I love his kit. Red Megumi. Like I said earlier, Megumi is someone who came out who does his job good, but wasn't anything crazy. He was the first unit to have 200% stat debuffs, and that made him very strong on red. Again, godly but type restricted. He is slightly harder to maintain his CE because he doesn't have a way to recover it like other units do, and they are high cost. His S3 is 25 CE, his S2 is 20 CE. His ult is good, but the only thing with his ult is you kind of have to manage it a little bit more because it only lasts 3 turns compared to other buffs and debuffs. It means you have to sync him up with the DPSs a bit more, but he's a very good unit. He protects himself. He has the bunnies that protect him. It nullifies attacks once per turn and then reduces the damage that he takes. I like him. He's very good. I wish he did a little bit more damage. That's all I have to really say about him is I wish he did more damage. Very good unit though. He's going to carry your teams early because it applies a ridiculous amount of stat debuffs. Red Jogo. Another unit where I want to say he's incredible, but I just have to objectively say he's not incredible. People have started to use him more, and he has become better ever since Momo dropped because it means that he is a proper stat buffer, but he still suffers from a lot of CE usage. If you haven't seen his kit, he is another unit that goes into a dual attack mode, but so Zonji doesn't have any debuffs when he goes into his attack mode. Ino has a debuff, but you can get rid of it if you use that S3 again. Jogo has a flat 40% damage reduction if he is in that dual hit mode. Now, I don't know if this is 100% true, but compared to Ino's, where it's not a special, it can't be removed, but it's not special. Because it is a special damage dealt decrease, it goes at the end of the equation and reduces his damage in total. I don't know if this is necessarily how it works, but that's how I feel it works and how I have in practice seen it work. Ino doesn't feel like he loses that much damage from his. Jogo, though, you definitely notice that decrease. But even so, you can clear hard sweep with this guy. He's a good unit. He does good damage. It's just really hard to maintain his CE. And he is a standard unit, so you're going to be able to get him to have higher starting CE and stuff like that. But he is just going to be harder to maintain in the beginning. And until he's in standard, I would say you probably shouldn't be summoning for this guy. Again, this isn't a summon guide, but I just want to put it into perspective why you might not want to summon on someone rather than telling you to summon for someone, because he's just not as good as he could have been. He has high stats. You can do a good amount of damage. He's harder to use, and it is a bit of RNG because you do need to crit to get into that 2-hit mode. So there's some RNG into his runs where it can be frustrating, where you have a really good run going in sweep, and then he doesn't crit once, and that means that you don't get into double action, then you don't do enough, and you don't clear. I like him. I was very excited by his release. His art is incredible. The sound design on his ult is amazing. I love it. He's just not strong enough to replace Red Yuta. They were pretty much on par when he released. I would like to say personally that he is slightly above Yuta because Yuta is a limited release. Jogo, you're going to be able to get A5. You can't do that to Yuta unless you're a whale. I think he is better than Yuta all around. I think he is better than Red Nobara all around. But he does take some time to learn and properly use. So, Kusakabe. Kusakabe is a very good unit who I would say started a new release for units. He was one of the first where it's like, okay, this is a really good support that does decent sub DPS. He's not as strong as the other one. Like I said, he was the beginning of that renaissance of supports, but very good unit. I like him. His ult is AoE, which is unique compared to a lot of other ones. It's Taijutsu ult. I like him. His 150% damage increase cap is a little frustrating because it's not as high as other supports are going to be. Like Nanami goes up to 210%, I believe it is, or something like that. And a lot of other units are going to bring you to a higher point. Like Megumi does at 340. DE Gojo is 300% for those turns. He lacks that max. Momo even gets close to it at 140 something percent. And that she does that in 2 turns compared to Kusakabe, who you have to build up based on crits. And don't get me wrong, that's not hard to do per se, but it is RNG related and it takes time. Like I did mention earlier before though, he has a unique S2 where if you use it before it, so you use it once, you use it again before it disappears, and it means that his effects extend to all allies. So everyone takes less jujutsu damage and it nullifies domain effects. It's niche, but it's good. Sorry, 40%. 40% is a lot, especially floor 90. Floor 90 is filled with jujutsu attacks, and he nullifies those to a certain extent where you can just out heal them. Very good unit. I wish that his buffs were slightly higher, but you can't necessarily complain about him. He's a standard release. He's amazing, but he's not crazy. Again, he is yellow restricted, so he is in that butt type restricted category. Blue Yuta, our next godly. This guy was crazy, just like Sukuna. His kit is so good and well-rounded. Whoever thought up of this and improved this, I love you. He is a incredible DPS. So he starts out in Taijutsu before you use his ult. You can increase his own Taijutsu and fill his own ult gauge with that S2. I don't recommend using that before ult. I don't think it's necessary. Some people say to use it. Then he turns into a Jujutsu after ult. His ult is all Jujutsu, so you can't ult on any, like, you can technically use him on Taijutsu floors. Some people say that you can. Geku likes to say that you can use him. I don't think he's necessarily effective. You're probably going to have better options, but you can do it because this S3 does 630%. It's really good. It's really, really good. And then after that, it changes into a Jujutsu attack, and it becomes even more broken. 960%. That's almost 1,000%. That's more than some ults. It's just like Blue Sukuna, except you don't need 90 CE. It's only 30 CE. And this guy gets CE up the wazoo. Like, when you get after ult, he goes into his state and you recover, you get 70% Jujutsu stat, and then you recover 50 cursed energy. Holy crap. Is that a lot of cursed energy? Because he starts out with more than most people. He gets it back, and you just get into a cycle of you're never running out of CE, essentially. Very good unit. Does so much damage. He does so much damage in break because he gets a damage increase during break. His crit damage is crazy. He does so much damage. It's unbelievable. He's a limited unit, though. Keep that in mind. He's limited. So you might not have him. But if you do have him, his does crazy damage. He has a state buff of 70%, which can't be nerfed by tower. And same with that 100% damage dealt when you're in break state. Both of those things. Two things that are 170% or not stats, 170% buffs that are not nerfed by tower. Crazy good. I love this unit. It's gonna be hard to say that you should pull for him if he appears again, because 2.5 is right around the corner. But he's probably the only one where I would say you might want to pull for him. He's the only, probably the only pull recommendation I would give you, because he does, especially currently, gap Blue Sukuna, who already gapped the rest of the game on his release. I love him. Amazing release. Ramji, or Rampage Yuji. I also think he is a crazy release. He is godly as well. His damage is off the charts. He is the first taijutsu character to have a ridiculously high ult percent. You get up to 2100% ult, while it also can Black Flash, which gives you a 4 times multiplier on top of 2100%. That it's so much damage. I have seen him hit 50 million damage ults as a taijutsu character, who is then going to follow up with his skill 3, doing 700% with a 3 times multiplier. The amount of damage this guy puts out every turn is crazy. I think his kit is a little awkward, because I think his kit's more viable in tower, because then you can stay in his assault mode, his nimble style, more and build up your CE. In sweep though, you're probably going to want to go immediately into his rampage style, because you need to build up CE usage to increase his ult. His ult starts out at 1050, but builds up based on how much cursed energy you've spent in your rampage mode. So anything using nimble does not count. You got to use your rampage mode attacks. It takes some time to build up to that, but this guy has cleared sweep in 10 turns. Hard sweep, 200 million damage in 10 turns. If I remember right, the damage number he put out in those 10 turns was 150 million. This guy does so much for himself and does so much damage. It's hard to compare him and Yuta, because Yuta somewhat relies on his stat buffs, his self stat buffs. Yuji does have a lot of those, but he doesn't necessarily rely on them because of this 2100% ult. This Yuji is broken. There's a reason he's ungodly. Anything you put in front of him, he is going to annihilate. Something that some JP people have pointed out is that a lot of early game content can be cleared with Black Flash characters, because these Black Flash damage 300%. So that's a 4 times multiplier. When you are on a stage with type disadvantage, I think it's a 1.5 times weaken. So you are essentially negating and even going over it a little bit with some of this skills that have Black Flash. It just nullifies any of that type debuff or type disadvantage. It just bypasses that if you Black Flash. It makes things so much easier to clear, and that's why units like Yellow Nanami were so good initially, is because that Black Flash damage just essentially ignores any disadvantage you have in tower. Amazing unit. Essentially 0 complaints, besides, you need a lot of CE, but he never feels like he runs out. He always feels like he has enough CE. Very rarely do I find myself having to use my S1. Incredible. And alongside Ramji released Green Todo. Another incredible unit who just puts out so much damage. Todo is by far my favorite release in a long time. And even though I like the new Green Nanami that we're going to talk about later, Todo is just crazy. People initially saw him, and because a lot of the Todos are a supporting role, people were confused because they're different colors. Ramji and Todo are different colors, so how is he going to support him? Oh, well, guess what? Todo is not a support. Maybe technically he is a support in people's minds, but as the game states, he's an attacker. He puts out so much damage while also boosting his ally who's in the book. It's just doing this much damage while also supporting your best friend status ally is ridiculous. Taijutsu stat and critical hit rate by 45% for 4 turns. It is incredible how much damage this guy puts out with follow-ups, and his ult is amazing because it's 1600%, and then all these hits have a chance to black flash and do 1.5 times damage. It is just so good. The amount of damage you put out with him is crazy, and then his follow-ups are always doing damage. They can black flash as well and do even more damage. You follow up, you crit, you get extra damage, you get extra crit, you get extra damage, you get extra black flashes, you get more damage. He just chains himself further and further into more damage as the run goes on. And now it's a black flash unit. It relies on a little bit of RNG. A lot of the time I recommend when you're doing sweep, just reset until you get a good run. There's no reason to go through a bunch of runs all the way until the end if you know that the run is not starting out good. These guys, I would recommend just resetting until you ult within the first couple turns, like what, for turn 2, 3 at most. You're going to want to get that rolling. It's a snowballing effect that this guy has. He even has simple domain for any domain expansions. He gets more stuff from that. It's just a little cherry on top to add onto his kit. You don't really run into anywhere. I guess maybe the Red Jogo EX fight technically, because he has a domain expansion and is weak to green. But you don't really run into a situation where you're going to need to use that. His damage is ridiculous. He supports the person in front of them, making him do even more damage with them. It's a chain snowball effect where you just get more and more black flash rate and do more damage and black flash more and crit more. By far the best release that they've had. Incredible kit. Incredible damage. All rounder. I love him. Yellow Sukuna is a weird release. He is someone who, yes, very, very good. Very good damage, very good kit. You never really run out of CE because he gets it back on crit damage. But he just doesn't really have a purpose. There's no floors that you want to bring him on compared to Tinjo. Tinjo is going to clear everything he clears quicker. Technically, that's not necessarily true because people A5 Sukuna are able to clear floor 90 just as quick as Tinjo, but I don't think once they get Urame and they are able to use the AoE debuffing alongside Tinjo, I think they're probably going to swap to that strategy and not use Sukuna anymore. But he's a very, very good unit. When you crit, you get 15 CE. He has a pretty low ult gauge. The only thing you have to keep in mind is if you want to use his ult, you have to use a dismantle and a cleave, and then he can ult. It's not like you have to use it before he ults. Once in a run, you have to use one dismantle and one cleave, and then he unlocks his ult. If you don't use his dismantle the entire time, you can't ult. If you don't cleave at least once after dismantling, he can't ult. But just like Yuji that came out, 2100% single target hit, plus 300% dot. It's ridiculously good. It does so much damage. The only thing is that it's single target, and there's not really any floors right now that are single target for yellow. At least jujutsu wise, there are some taijutsu floors that are single target, but he has a weird placement. I think they will release content that requires this guy, but he is a limited DPS, and currently there's no content that requires him. Tinjo is a standard unit that has crazy good damage AoE. I love this guy, just has a weird release. Not necessarily needed for anything in particular. Alright, Mahito. Mahito was a crazy release. A lot of people put him as number 1 in the game because of just how much he does damage-wise, debuff-wise. And one of the best things he does is increases crit damage, increases break damage, which, as I've stated multiple times in this video, is extremely important. The more you're breaking, the more damage you're doing, the more you're surviving. This Mahito excels at that and is also a mixed attacker. Remember, mixed goes through the debuffs that Tower gives you for specific types. On a taijutsu floor, his jujutsu damage is going to go through because he's a mixed unit. This is very important because more and more units are coming out that are mixed, and they do so much more damage and are much more versatile than people who are restricted to a specific type. Again, his debuffs are restricted to red. Anything that he does for his teammates is restricted to red, but anything that he is placed in front of, he will do incredibly well. all of it is great. He heals himself. He gets no CE back. That's probably the only thing that he lacks, is some way to recover CE. Although you don't necessarily, as long as you don't spam his moves, it's like his S2, you're going to be fine. You're going to have enough CE. But it is possible to run out with him. That is something you need to watch out for. He has a zone buff even, because before he transforms, he can Black Flash. It's a guaranteed Black Flash. Very good unit. There is not much more to talk about with him, but it's just crazy how much he does and how much damage he's outputting. Incredible unit. If you can pick him up, he's going to absolutely destroy everything in front of him. Point 2 Gojo. So I had a talk with Geku about this. I put him in Godly after a little bit of talking with people, because I think early game, his debuffs on ult and then the buffs he gives you when he leaves are going to be extremely good. He is a very good unit who's going to do a lot of damage, and anytime that you run into a situation where he's not going to do enough damage, he is going to allow your units to clean up by leaving with some additional support. He's unique compared to other Gojos, because other ones don't do that. They do DPS, they leave, they don't come back. This one will actually support your team when he leaves with a 60% stat buff for 4 turns, and then his ult is also giving that 150% damage taken increase. That's half of what the original Domain Gojo does, because it's a quicker ult. It's 0.2 compared to the full thing, but he does a lot of damage. It's an AoE 1700% taijutsu damage ult. It's good. Very good unit. I think he's going to make anyone who has him do a lot better, because when he leaves, because he leaves like every other Gojo essentially, besides Teen Joes, but when he leaves, he's increasing all of your allies' taijutsu and jututsu stat by 60%. That is a big amount, and that's going to give you a big boost after he leaves to clean up anything that he didn't do. I love this guy. I don't think he necessarily has a place late game. He's gonna quote-unquote fall off, but people do clear hard sweep with him. He does really well on floors as a sub DPS before he leaves, but I think he's gonna do better for you early game. He's currently out on global. He's currently the person you should be re-rolling for, but I'm not necessarily sure if you should summon for him in the future if he reruns. He doesn't necessarily have a place. The only thing he is there for is Taijutsu Blue, but like I said, people sleep on Blue Maki. And there are just other options technically. Like I said, you could technically use Yuta. Even Blue Sukuna has an S2 that was used on a lot of Blue Taijutsu floors. He's going to excel at it, but he's a limited release. I don't know if you should summon. If you're gonna reroll, get him. But I don't know about reruns. Free Yuji. Calling games Yuji. This guy is a straight up upgrade from the original Green Yuji. He does everything better. He does more damage while providing damage increased buffs to his allies. He also increases their crit damage, which pairs extremely well with any of the Gojos or the Nanami that came out recently. It's very good. Crit damage is very good, even for Todo as well, because Todo wants to crit to give himself stat buffs, and this Yuji is increasing his crit and then increasing his crit damage. Is very, very good in combination with Todo. The fact that this guy was given out for free at this level of amazingness as a unit is incredible. It gave me hope for this game again. I think they're heading in a good direction, and this guy was the start of that. Giving him out for free, I was very happy to get a dupe of him, because then he functions better as a sub DPS, but you can totally get away without you having one. He's a crazy good unit. He gives you ult gauge on Black Flash. It's great. I love him. He was such a good release, and he's free if you log in until I believe April. Global will get him eventually, and he's going to complete any green team that you have. Amazing unit. The thing is he is limited. He was given out for free, but he is limited. Keep that in mind. He is limited. So you're not going to be able to pull him dupes from the standard banner. You're not going to see him unless he reruns. But if you're able to get him now or whenever he comes out on global, incredible unit. Completely replaces Green Yuji, the original one, even with SP buffs. He does more. Urame. Urmei is the start of what we saw as unnerfable standard units. And what I mean by that is her... Sorry. Fuck. Her debuffs do not get nerfed by tower. They are a passive-based debuff. And so this works on buff floors as well. Even though on buff floors they nerf debuffs, this is a passive, which means that it does not get nerfed. So you get up, it's lower than other, like I said, I was complaining about Tusakabe only doing 150%. Urmei only goes up to 100%, I mean 120%, but it works on debuffs and buffs, and it's AoE, so it's incredible. Very good. I love Urmei. She is a sign that this game is getting better. She does so much as a DPS as well. People clear 90 with her as the main DPS. She's a very good release, solid damage, good kit. You might run into CE issues if you don't maintain it well, because that S3 is very costly at 30 CE. But AoE increases break damage received. Again, can't reiterate how important that's become. She's going to clear any early game content so easy, and she is a staple of late game yellow teams at this point. So, type restricted but godly. Now we got another one. Momo, the next standard unit that came out that's just broken. Momo, I think a lot of people downplay. And I don't understand why. Because people have been dealing with SR Yaga for so long, and maybe that gives them a little bit of Stockholm syndrome when it comes to getting off of the SR Yaga train. But Momo does everything that Yaga does, but better, with more options, with more damage, with additional effects. She's an SSR who can dodge, which means she gets CE back when she dodges. She gets CE off of her S1. She has good damage on this. 160% doesn't seem like much, but when you're using it every single turn, it builds up over time. She can stun early game, which is amazing AoE stun. She inflicts darkness on the same move, and if she doesn't inflict darkness or stun, she will gain her stacks quicker. It's a 65%, so she's very similar to the Shokos, where it only takes 3 turns to reach max stats. But she also has a built-in increase on her reconnaissance stacks. They're not as important as other people who stack. It's good that they didn't make her stacks too important, because that means that it takes time to get those stacks. But she gets an additional up to 20% stat buffs. She gets break damage 15%, ultimate charge rate 10%. That means your entire run, you get an additional 10% ult charge rate. That is so good. People will underestimate that, but that changes your run entirely. Chaining combo ults is very important late game, and will make early game wicked easy. When you chain combo ults, you're buffing each character, you're increasing your other allies' ult gauge, and you're doing more damage with those combo ults. Very important to learn to chain your combo ults. Do not waste ults if you're able to combo them. She is a great release, does good damage, break damage. People are underestimating her. She even maintains her stat buffs on her ult, which means you just keep going, doing more damage quicker. Very good unit. Don't let people tell you that she's not good. But again, she is a standard unit. With 2.5 coming up, Global should get a good at least month and a half, maybe 2 months of notice on what you guys will be summoning for. So you're not going to end up summoning for her, but if you get her from singles or something, she is infinitely better than SR Yaga. Infinitely better for Red Team. Now, the latest release, Green Nanami. I love this guy. Every day he gets better. This might be controversial, but I think he is godly. And I'm going to tell you why. I've seen recent videos from some people, and all respect to Joshin, because he is a very good, well-informed JJKPP player. But I don't agree with his recent video where he talked about hating this Nanami. And I sort of understand his point. But his point is that he doesn't like this Nanami being replaced. This Nanami came out in 2023. It is now 2026. This Nanami has gotten adjustments. this Nanami has gotten SP buffed. He was never properly relevant because he was not a good character. It is, in my opinion, completely fine for them to replace him at this point. Especially if that unit is a standard unit. It doesn't mean you're missing out because it's limited. It just means that maybe you'll have to wait a little bit longer to get him. But he does everything this Nanami does to a way better extent. Now, we talked about how important mixed damage units are in late tower because it means you can use them on Jujutsu and Taijutsu floors. This Nanami is a mixed character who has very high percents, while also increasing his own break damage. His S2 is 400%. It can Black Flash, doing even more damage. They don't have the numbers on the wiki yet, but from my gameplay, I believe it is at least a 200% multiplier. Maybe I could be wrong, but it could be 200%. Maybe it's 150. But very good damage, and if he has 60 more CE, which is not hard to maintain with this Nanami, you get damage increase to all allies. Like I said, not as important as other buffs or debuffs, but the fact that it's there is just an additional portion of why he's good. His S3 does so much damage. 330%, 330%. So you're doing 660% while buffing your characters and increasing break damage received to the enemy. It does so much damage, I've seen it do 12 million in sweep runs. That's hard to get to. Not a lot of units are you going to see doing a 12 million S3. 35 CE seems like a lot, and you do want to make sure you maintain 60 or above for his stat buffs. But in my opinion, and I have him at A0, so I don't even have the additional CE yet for A2 or anything, and I don't have the additional damage from A1. This guy does insane damage. And his ult does even more. He increases his own break damage by 100% one time. I don't know if you guys have ever seen my floor 65 run, I believe it was, but I used Yellow Mechamaru, and no, not the one on my YouTube. I didn't use that one. Okay, what I'll explain is I was doing runs with Yellow Mechamaru on those floors, just fucking around, and with those break damage increases, you do so much break damage that you can just straight up, the boss comes out of break, it has full break bar, you ult and you just send him straight back into break. That is, if you do that, that is 6 turns where the boss cannot hit you and you do additional damage. It is broken to have good break damage in this game. He's increasing their break damage taken. He's increasing his own break damage for the whole team. It's debuffing. For himself, he's buffing. The amount of damage this guy puts out is crazy. I have him at A0. In my video, I show that he does over 100 million damage A0 on hard sweep. People have become accustomed to the fact that most units can do it, but this Nanami is doing it at A0 days after his release comes out. He also has a lot of different buffs. He has 6 auto skills. I think that's the most out of anyone in this game. Someone else might, I think one of the Yujis might come closer with Blue Yuji after his SP buff. But anyways, he has Revival. That's very good for self-sustaining. I think there actually is situations where this is a detriment to him, because if your whole team is low and then he gets killed, then it attracts attacks to himself for 3 turns, and he can just revive and then straight up die next turn. 3 turns is a little bit much. I get the intent because he has damage decreased or damage received decreased, and there's more of it later in his kit as well. You get up to, I think, 70%, but he can just straight up die from his own revival. But having a revival itself, and you know what, if he was gonna die anyways, he gets 1 more turn to do something, 1 or 2 more turns to survive. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but his own revive can be his own detriment. He gets a permanent stat increase after that, and then he also has his overtime. This overtime is really good for sweep, because the strat that I found it out myself, maybe someone else was also doing it, but I put out one of the very first Nanami sweep clears, at least on YouTube, and what my strategy was is that I would combo ult on turn 6, and then he has 3 turns to do, or sorry, 2 turns to get more ult gauge, and then this pops and recovers his ult gauge by 1,000. So you ult combo ult with one person, you wait 2 turns, and then you're gonna combo ult with another person. His overtime is extremely good, and as turns go up, he gets up to 40% or up to 30% damage reduction flat. This 1% per turn, so you're not really gonna get to that because it's on the 9th turn. Higher tower floors are limited to 30 turns, but early game it's gonna be really good. He has a counter, which has it just has a certain chance to activate. It feels pretty low. I would guess a 10% chance, like the other Yuji, Culling Game Yuji. But it also can Black Flash. It increases his own crit rate and increases damage dealt. It's a very good counter. Not many units get a counter in this game. He just gets it for free constantly. He also has the crit enhancement. It's very good. Increases his own crit rate and taijutsu stat. If you crit multiple times, you're getting a 60% stat boost. He has his own, which gives him another 30% stat boost and increases his Black Flash rate even more. He recovers 10 CE per Black Flash as well, so you can get 20 CE per turn. So when you're in that Black Flash or zone state, you automatically get 5 CE per turn, and then you get 10 additional if you Black Flash again. So you can get 15 CE per turn. He maintains his own CE pretty well. It is a little bit hard to maintain late run because you want a S3 for damage, but that costs 35. So you kind of have to S1 for a while, but he also recovers CE on that S1, so it's not the biggest deal in the world. It's also increasing his crit rate, which means you're going to get more buffs for himself and stuff like that. Not a biggest deal, but extremely good unit who is mixed, who has stat buffs that can't be nerfed. He's going to be good on taijutsu, jujutsu, debuff, buff floors. He is a very good unit. I love this release so much. As I get to use him more, I fall in love with him more. I mean, how can you not fall in love with that face? This art is incredible. Holy fuck. I straight up disagree with some people on the JJK server. I think he deserves godly. People would probably put him amazing, but I would say they haven't played with him enough or don't have him. Now we're down to some small niche little characters. We have SR Miwa. She is good for one specific strat. And that strat is going to be what I explained earlier, where you have Todo with her, and they just bounce off of each other, and that's pretty much her only use. SR Nanami, your early game damage increase unit. His buffs suck. He is useless later on. His damage isn't actually that bad. I've tried doing runs with him just for shits and giggles to attempt things with worse characters. His damage is pretty good, but he buffs really slow, and his buff is worse on his ult, so it's just not a good character. Doesn't maintain his own CE. It's because he's an SR. He's a very old SR, but you're going to use him early game. But I don't think that warrants putting him any higher just because you're only using him because he's your only option. He's not good, per se. It's just he's your only option. SR Yaga. He is the only SR in Godly. And that's because he is a universal stat buffer that is going to carry you hard through this game until you get other stat buffers. Blue doesn't even have one yet, so people still use him on blue floors up until you're not allowed to, past 81. Sweep for blue, he's very often used. People have found better, quote-unquote, better strats with just using debuffers across blue. But SR Yaga is a staple of blue teams for a very long time. That might change somewhat soon, but very simple character, just gives 46% stat buffs on his S2 for 4 turns. Great unit. I'm glad he got replaced by Momo, though. Momo is significantly better than him, but they need to give blue a stat buffer because they're still stuck with him. SR Shoko. She has stalling potential for healing your team. Not very good, though. Again, she's going to fall off, but you might use her. You know what? No, I'm going to put her in great because you might use her early game for stall tactics. So if you're going to stall, you're probably going to run her. There's plenty of healing memories in this game now, though, so you don't necessarily have to. SR Junpei doesn't have any use. Momo, she is another crappy stat or damage increase buffer. Worse than Nanami, though. The problem with her is while she gives the same buff as her SSR variant, it's limited to 1 use. So you can't, if you want to buff for 2 turns, you can only use you can't use an attack before her second buff. She has to buff twice before you hit. It's frustrating to use her. Her buffs are lower than future units. You only use her because you have to. SR Kaito is amazing. He's the only SR in amazing. He decreases Jujutsu damage taken and will be very good for for stalls. And later in runs like floor 67, he was a staple of floor 67, preventing your team from dying. You take almost 0 damage across that run using this character. That's pretty much all he's used for, but he's good enough at what he does to warrant being an amazing. SR Panda. Panda, Inumaki, and Maki, where for the JJK0 movie, you can't get them anymore. Unless there's a rerun going on, you can get them from the banners. Panda is actually pretty good. He's the Taijutsu stat debuffer. He was the only one for a while until they changed Miguel. But he does good at that job. But he's not amazing. SR Inumaki, he works similar. It's not very good. SR Maki is actually a very strong unit for being an SR. Her multipliers are great. Her personal stat or her self buffs are also amazing. She carried a lot of people through a lot of floors and a lot of content until we got SSR Maki and other options like Blue Sukuna's S2, Yuta, and obviously 0.2 Gojo. But she for a long time carried Blue Taijutsu. Very good for an SR. SR Gakuganji. he's also in great, but I don't like him being there. He is the only green. So actually, he's not green. Sorry, he's a universal stat debuffer, but he takes so much CE to do that job. It is a 4-turn 25% debuff, and then you need 25 CE, or not 20. Sorry, it's not 25%. It's 37. Adds up to about 150%. But it's 25 CE, so you need 75 CE in the bank, and then 3 turns later you'll have 30 CE more because you gain back 10 every turn. So 75 CE, and then you can buff for 4 turns straight, or debuff for 4 turns straight. He's an SR, low health, doesn't do damage. It takes 4 turns and so much CE. I desperately want them to replace SSR Geto. Please replace Team Geto. R Inumaki, one of the only R characters in the game to have a use, and that's going to be the fact that he can increase your team's damage, or increases their defense, and then increases their ult gauge. So a lot of people have strats where you put a taunt memory on him, you buff your team, you give him ult gauge and defense, and then you get killed and you leave. Very good for short strats and nuking. SR Kaito and SR Kaito are both an amazing. I would honestly, I want to put Kaito in Godly, but in later runs you don't use him for anything besides sweep because you can't run him off type. So he's gonna go in amazing, even though he is a staple of sweep, because you use his S2 twice and then your team is good on CE for the rest of the run. You can spam whatever you want essentially and you're good. You won't use him for much outside that, but he's very good at his one job, which is being a CE battery. And I guess you can throw a Jichi in here. He's a very bad Taijutsu buffer. I love Jichi. I hope they give him an SSR at some point, but his R is not very good. Also, R Yuki, she has a taunt. What you'll do is you place some memory on her that you want to buff the team with, and then she taunts and will die, and then you swap someone else in. She is solely a sacrifice to get some other buffs. So that does it for this list. This is my overall idea of, if you have these characters available as a new player, how they will perform when you have all the content in the game ahead of you. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a row below this, which is godly but falls off. I waited to do this until now because I wasn't sure if I wanted to, but Domain Gojo, he's godly but falls off late game. His debuffs are only for a couple turns in a row. You need consistency late game tower. He doesn't have that. Sukuna, we don't have a blue stat buffer. I think there might be a revitalization of this guy once we get a stat buffer, but even then, he doesn't have self buffs that are proper for late game. These two are gonna fall off, unfortunately. Hojo, you could even put in this category because, like I said, later on in the game, you can't stall with him anymore, and he takes too long to build up. People typically, I think people you do run him, but I've avoided him entirely. I got him A1 and didn't upgrade him for about 6 months until I decided to just for the heck of it upgrade him. Mahito is another one who's going to be godly early game but fall off. At 461 and above, they reduce the amount of damage he does. They specifically targeted him. It's any percent damage that is done is reduced. So he goes from 15% to I believe 6%. And then at the same time, those floors at turn 30 make the boss do a crap ton of damage. So you can't stall through those. He loses that value. 81, it's actually impossible to use him above there because they make it so that you can't gain ult gauge if you're off color. Technically, he could. I think people do actually do some runs with him on green floors, but it's not optimal. You might be able to use him in those later floors, but he falls off greatly from his intended purpose initially. Momo is another one that falls off greatly once you get higher into the game. Her buff only goes up to 140 something percent, and she's not as versatile, doesn't sustain her own CE. She falls off. Someone you could maybe put in here is Megumi, but I'm not going to because he is very good on his current floors anyways. You could use Kusakabe, you could use Urame, but Megumi is an option and he does very good all the way through these floors. So that does about it for this list. If you guys have any questions, any arguments that you want to give me for moving characters, feel free to comment below. Talk to me in the Discord server. Yell at me for being biased. I would love to talk about this because this is what I think is a more interesting take, because I'm not telling you who to summon for. I'm never going to tell you who to summon for because this game does not give enough cubes for you to summon on everyone who I'm going to tell you to summon on. You kind of have to spend money on this game if you want to be able to get all the good units. This is just a general outline of how units are going to perform for you when you start this game. So again, if you have any questions, comments, ideas, comment down below. Let me know if you'd like this kind of video. I put more effort into this. It's going to be a very long video. I apologize for making you wait through all that, but I did want to comprehensively go over each character and what they do and why I'm placing them where I place them. I plan on doing a mini-series in the future where I'm going to go over all of these characters and give a breakdown of their kits. I'm going to make it a quick, ideally 5-minute video, gameplay from the character, explanation of the kit, how to use them properly, and I'll have a mini-series and a playlist on my YouTube channel that I'm going to start doing. So subscribe if you want to see something like that. I'm still going to occasionally post gameplay. This game is coming back for me. I like the content that we currently have, but they don't have enough content. They're good units, good content, not enough. There's nothing to do right now. I'm stuck just doing dailies. There's nothing going on. Please, for the love of God, if you put more content out, this game will be in a healthy state, which it hasn't been in for a very long time. So, again, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions, comments. Reach out to me whenever you want, and I will see you guys in the next video.